Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 328. In 2016, prosecutors in the Manhattan office decided that they weren't going to pursue charges against Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Why in the hell would they not pursue charges? Can't tell me there wasn't enough evidence. We had mountains of it. So what was the motivation for this office, for these prosecutors, to not chase Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? Could it have anything to do with who was in charge of the Just Us department at the time? Miss Loretta Lynch? Was she trying to protect Bill Clinton? Quite possible. We know that they were tight. We know that Loretta Lynch and Hillary were tight. And we know that Bill Clinton had big-time ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Were the prosecutors in on this? Was Preet in on this? He was the man down there at the time. What did he know? When did he know it? And why did they not pursue Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in 2016? Well, let's jump into this daily news article and see what they think. Headline: Manhattan federal prosecutors declined to pursue Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell case in 2016. This article was authored by Stephen Rex Brown. So, again, my question is, why did they not pursue them? There's a lot of people that, have questions like this. Why in the world, with all of the evidence that they had compiled even up to that point, were these two not pursued? Who was protecting them and why? In July 2019, then Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman proclaimed before a bunch of cameras that the feds were proud to stand up for Jeffrey Epstein survivors. Yeah, okay, Mr. Berman. Nothing happened while you were in office, really, dude. You didn't do shit. You didn't help the investigation one bit. You were just another bumbling fool. So please, spare us with your platitudes. My office will not rest until perpetrators of these types of crimes are brought to justice. Victims' voices, including the many voices of Epstein's alleged victims, must be heard, Berman said. Yeah, your office did a real good job of that in 2016. All of your cohorts, all of your buddies, all of your awesome, hard-charging after justice friends in the prosecutor's office, they sure did a real good job of that. In reality, your office and just about every other office in the whole entire nation abandoned these girls. So don't act like after the fact in 2000, after he's arrested, after the new expose by the Miami Herald, after the renewed interest that you and your office were on the front line of making this happen. Such bullocks. It wasn't always that way. On February 29th, 2016, the office's top human trafficking prosecutor, Amanda Kramer, met with defense attorneys representing survivors of Epstein and his alleged madam, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scumbag and bipedal serpent Ghislaine Maxwell, sources tell the Daily News. So in 2016, Amanda Kramer, who was the head honcho of trafficking, the trafficking office of prosecuting people who engage in that behavior, met with the attorneys for the survivors. And nothing came of it, obviously. Another person who acts like they care, but really doesn't. Another person who's in a position of power who decides not to act. Are these people ever going to be held responsible? At the very least, they should be barred from public office. At the very least, we should not be paying taxpayer dollars to these people. Don't you think? The attorneys urged Kramer to open an investigation of the duo. But Kramer had many questions, including how Epstein's controversial non-prosecution agreement with the Southern District of Florida in 2007 would impact a new investigation, the sources said. You see what it's about here, right? Right from the beginning, you see what the SDNY is about. It's not about the investigation. Kramer didn't want to do the legwork. She didn't want to put in the time. She didn't want to put in the resources and really go after this. What else were they busy doing in 2016 in that office? Oh yeah, busy doing political hit jobs. I forgot. They were way too busy to actually do their jobs. They were too busy engaged in political infighting. The FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Just Us Department, all need to be completely torn down and rebuilt correctly. The attorney attempted to pique Manhattan federal prosecutors' interests in a second meeting in the summer of 2016 after Maxwell allegedly committed perjury, two sources said. Nah, wait, perjury? Psh, we don't have time for that here. We don't have time to pursue someone like Ghislaine Maxwell on simple perjury. We are engaged in other things. We are busy doing other things. Really? The head of human trafficking. And you think the case is too rough to pursue? You don't know if you have the right resources to pursue it? What does that even mean? You work at the SDNY. Plenty of resources for you, especially to go after somebody like Jeffrey Epstein. What, these resources just automatically somehow appeared in the office now that after Maxwell has been arrested and the case has been growing? So those resources just showed up? No, those resources were available throughout the whole entire time that Kramer was in office, that Preet was in office, that Loretta Lynch was in office. But you know what the truth is, folks? They did not care. Point blank, period. The sources said a second meeting occurred, but another source familiar with the outreach to the government insisted it never happened. Epstein was paying Maxwell's legal bills at the time, and the survivors' attorneys believed the pair were in a perjury conspiracy, sources said. Well, how about some egg on the face for Mr. Preet's office? How about some egg on the face for Amanda Kramer? Because guess what? They were right. There was perjury going on. Epstein and Maxwell were still conversating, were still in contact, were still working together behind the scenes. And Amanda Kramer and Preet and Loretta Lynch did not care enough to pursue it. You want reality, folks? There it is, right for you, right in your face. That's the reality of the situation. No bullshitting around, no nonsense. They did not care. Both efforts went nowhere. We were saying to anyone who would listen, we've got clients who were abused, some of them underage. We have the evidence. There's a whole record that's been developed. We can establish beyond any reasonable doubt that there was a massive sex trafficking ring going on, said David Boies, an attorney for Epstein survivors, and they didn't care. They didn't even bother to look at the evidence. What did Amanda Kramer care? She's way too busy going after her political opponents. We know that that's how Preet was rolling, and we certainly know Loretta Lynch isn't above it. So you see the nonsense. You see how this case was ignored for decades. And then you wonder why people are mad? You wonder why people are pissed off and demanding justice? This cannot be allowed to play out in America. This sort of thing cannot be allowed to happen. If you're engaged in a human sex trafficking operation, it is time for you to be punished. Modern day slavery, folks, that's exactly what it is. And right now, at this point in time, there are more people in bondage than at any other point in time in history. And human trafficking plays a huge, gigantic part in that. And Preet and Amanda and Loretta Lynch, way too busy to engage, huh? The Manhattan U.S. attorney at the time, Preet Bharara, was not aware of the meetings, the news confirmed. It's unclear how far up the Southern District's chain of command the proposal went. Oh, please, I don't buy that for a minute. I don't buy that for a minute. It's plausible deniability, huh? His underlings are making these decisions, huh? No one's passing that over his desk, huh? Now, if we're going to destroy Acosta, and we should have, and we did, then Preet and his office must also get the same exact treatment. They played a huge role in this in 2016. And furthermore, what did Preet ever do to go after Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell? What did his office ever do? Not a thing. Not one thing ever. And this happened right under their nose. How many blocks away from their office was Jeffrey Epstein abusing these girls? We never contacted Preet directly. We thought he would have been briefed on a matter of this importance. And we hoped to make progress with the staff and didn't want it to be seen as going over their head. But in retrospect, we probably should have gone to him directly, Boys said. Again, I don't buy that Preet didn't have any idea about what was going on. He ran that office like a dictator, iron-gloved dictator. You mean to tell me he never saw anything for this? And if that's the case, then he wasn't as good at his job as people said. Then he wasn't as good of an administrator as he made himself out to be. How don't you know what your underlings are working on? How don't you know about big cases such as this? It's just like the people who say, I didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, really. I was just hanging out and we were having some coffee. Yeah, okay, sure you didn't. That might work for an average human being, some normal person, just worried about their life every day. But when someone like Preet Baraha acts like they had no idea what was going on in their office, I tell you here and now, that is some straight up bullshit. I don't believe it for one single second. The Virgin Islands Attorney General accused Epstein of bringing underage girls to his private island of perversions as recently as 2018. So, how many girls could have been saved if Preet and his office would have done the right thing? How many girls would not have been abused if Preet and his office would have been focusing on actual crimes? But no. Too busy playing politics. Too busy trying to run hatchet jobs. And this is the result. This is the result when you have the FBI playing grab ass. A person closely familiar with the Southern District emphasized that understanding of the Epstein saga was radically different before the Miami Herald published its bombshell investigation in late 2018. Yeah, right. That's such bullshit. I don't know about you folks, but I'm not letting them get off the hook with that one. Everybody knew, okay? Everybody knew. Anybody with Google knew what Jeffrey Epstein was about. Anybody who listened to the testimony of those girls knew what Jeffrey Epstein was about. And anybody saying any different, any prosecutor especially working in this office who says any different is a straight up bullshitting liar. Okay? Liar. The story raised major questions about why then Southern District of Florida U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta let the perv off so easy. Reopening the case brought by another U.S. attorney is rare, the person said. Yeah, well, your job is to take those steps. Your job is to break the mold. Your job as the honcho at SDNY is to take the lead for the rest of the country and show them how it's done. But you didn't have the stones. You didn't have the fruits, and you didn't care about these survivors. That's all it breaks down to. That's what it comes down to, and that's the bottom line. You just presume that major, significant, well-respected U.S. attorneys' offices don't F this up, the person said. Look, the way that they're trying to pin all of the blame on the Florida office is hilarious here. Sure, they definitely are to blame for the non-prosecution agreement, how everything went the first time around, but let's be real. What have you done? Preet, what did you do to help these girls? Not a thing. Never lifted a finger. Never sanctioned Epstein. Never went after the money laundering. You knew about the SARS. You knew about the financial crimes. And you didn't do shit. So please, get off of your ivory tower when you're speaking to me. It obviously seems very tragic in hindsight, but if people reopened our case, we'd lose our minds. I don't care. You see the problem here, folks? If people reopened our case, we'd lose our minds. Stuff your ego. Stuff it deep. Because your ego should play no part in how we pursue criminal cases. If you effed up, if you didn't do the right thing, and someone else reopens your case, well, do a better job as a prosecutor then. How about that? Too difficult to ask? Well, if that's the case, then kick rocks. We'll bring somebody in like Allison Moe who actually cares. The sources who described attorneys' disappointment in 2016 were quick to credit the prosecutors and FBI agents who brought the Epstein and Maxwell cases that began under Berman. But the attorneys' earlier efforts to persuade the feds to investigate Epstein, led by Boies, one of the country's most powerful lawyers, will likely be scrutinized in Maxwell's criminal case. Yeah, you think? Of course it's going to be scrutinized. They effed up. They didn't do the right thing. The SDNY did not have their eye on the ball. They were way too busy playing politics. They were way too busy engaging, when they should have been chasing down and destroying Jeffrey Epstein's network and all of his associates. Maxwell's attorneys have argued she was the victim of a perjury trap set by survivors' attorneys and that the feds improperly obtained her depositions, which remain under seal. Well, here's an idea. If you're not lying about something, then you will not be walked into a perjury trap. Okay? And again, folks, remember, when we're looking at this, look at what her defense is talking about. They're talking about technicalities again. They're talking about loopholes. Because when it comes down to the evidence, they know it's not on their side, and they have no chance of defending their client on the merits of her innocence alone. Prosecutors accuse Maxwell of lying in those depositions about her knowledge of Epstein's sick lifestyle, including his collection of sex toys and obsession with underage girls. Her legal team will argue to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals Tuesday that the deposition should remain under seal. So that deposition happens today. We'll see what happens there, and we will definitely report on that. The deposition transcripts obtained by the government and the indictment's perjury counts place in a new light plaintiff's earlier litigation conduct, suggesting the planned use of Miss Maxwell's deposition as a perjury trap, Maxwell's attorney Tai Gee wrote in July. Again, technicalities. It's not that my client is innocent. It's not that my client didn't do this. It's that we're going to use these technicalities so that you can't pursue justice. But attorneys for Epstein survivors were not in cahoots with the feds in 2016, despite their best efforts. Bingo. There you go. That's the tell. 2016, the FBI and the authorities were way too busy effing around to even bother with this case. Attorneys Stan Pottinger, Bradley Edwards, and Peter Skinner attended a February sit-down with Kramer in a conference room at the Southern District's headquarters at 1 Street, Andrews Plaza. Skinner, an attorney at the firm Boies Schiller Flexner, attended in part because he is a former assistant U.S. attorney at the Southern District who knew Kramer, sources said. So remember, at all of these legal offices, Schiller and Boies and Schiller, however you want to pronounce it, whatever, all these powerful offices, they all have ex-prosecutors that work with them because these prosecutors have a relationship with the current prosecutors. And, well, I guess it doesn't hurt to have a friendly face, huh, when you're trying to work out a deal. The team represented Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts in a defamation lawsuit against Maxwell, an alleged madam, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag, and bipedal serpent for Epstein. The lawsuit focused on whether the British socialite, bipedal serpent, smeared Roberts' name by saying she lied about Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. But it also provided a means to obtain evidence and force people in Epstein's orbit to testify under oath. It sure did, and it was a brilliant move on the part of the lawyers. These lawyers know their business, and the lawyers for the survivors, for the most part, are really charging hard here, and they're really working to make sure that things swing in the right direction. The legal team presented Kramer, the Southern District's coordinator for Justice Department initiatives combating human trafficking and child exploitation, with what they'd learned about Epstein's scheme. The multimillionaire financier, pedophile, had abused dozens of underage girls in Palm Beach and elsewhere during sexualized massages, they said. With Maxwell's assistance, Epstein had allegedly created a trafficking pyramid scheme in which girls were rewarded for recruiting new underage victims. Kramer was concerned about the non-prosecution agreement, according to sources. Notice it's about the technicality. It's not about, you know what? I don't care about that. This is an important case. I'll find a way around it. I'm going to prosecute these people. No. Kramer, we got this non-prosecution agreement. I don't think we can go after them. The technicalities. That kind of shit makes me crazy. If you're a prosecutor and wrongdoing has been done, investigate it. If your investigation turns up that the person in question is guilty, arrest them. That's how the system works. This has already been looked at, a source recalled Kramer saying, so what you're really asking us to do is redo what the U.S. Attorney in Florida did? Yeah, that's exactly what you were being asked to do, Miss Kramer. You don't even bring this to your boss? Something this important didn't go to Preet, huh? And I'm sure Loretta Lynch had no idea. Talk about covering for people. Talk about making sure your friends are covered for. What an absolute dumpster fire Loretta Lynch was. What an absolute dumpster fire Mr. Preet was. So anytime you hear one of the people from the previous administration get up there with their ivory towers and their platitudes and their "we're down with Me Too's," well, just remember in 2016, they didn't do shit either. Acosta negotiated the agreement with Epstein's powerhouse legal team that allowed the sex offender to dodge serious federal charges and plead guilty to state prostitution charges. And again, do you really think, just like with Lynch and Preet here and Amanda Kramer, that this didn't go up the line? Didn't go up to the Bush administration? Didn't go up to Mukasey and his deputies? Of course it did. These attorney generals in these states, they don't make these decisions on their own. They have bosses that they have to answer to as well, folks. And the bureaucracy is large. The deal is a critical chapter in the Epstein saga, which the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals described as a tale of national disgrace. And now remember, the 11th Circuit is looking at this to see what's what, and we might get that non-prosecution agreement overturned. And if that's the case and that gets overturned, it will be a field day, folks. An absolute field day on bringing these scumbags to heel. A second source recalled Kramer looking for a New York angle to the Epstein scheme, which would allow him to be charged in Manhattan. But evidence that girls had endured the multimillionaire's massages at the Upper East Side mansion was thin at the time, the sources said. Oh, thin at the time, huh? Thin at the time. That's what they want you to believe. It was thin at the time. That's an outright lie, and Amanda Kramer should be held responsible for not pursuing this. She should at the very least have to answer some hard questions, because this is absolute bullshit. Do you have cases of Epstein's abuse here in New York? A second source familiar with the meeting recalled Kramer asking. The answer was not necessarily, or at least not yet. We asked, why can't you open an investigation and look for them? We'll look for them, and you look for them. So Kramer, who did not seem unsympathetic or skeptical, also asked about the statute of limitations for some of Epstein's crimes, the sources said. So the author here and the sources try and make it cover for Kramer. Let's just be honest, all right? Let's just be honest about what occurred here. They were negligent in their duties in the SDNY. Preet was the boss. All buck stops with him. And further, Loretta Lynch should be held to account as well. The team left the meeting feeling optimistic. The AUSA acted confident that a case would be brought against Epstein for crimes committed against Virginia and others in New York. Of course, first, she had to have the facts, witnesses, evidence, and victims of a New York crime. We assured the prosecutor that the number of victims in New York far exceeded those discovered in Florida. The group walked out excited that New York was finally going to bring a case against Epstein. You would think that when you bring all of that to an attorney, U.S. Attorney's office, and you present all of the facts and you let them know that there's more victims in New York than there were even in Florida, that the Attorney General would at the very least kick a few tires, ask a few questions, initiate a low-key investigation. None of that occurred. I said to David and Pete, don't hold your breath. The Southern District obviously doesn't know who they're dealing with yet, Edwards wrote in his book, Relentless Pursuit, My Fight for the Victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Edwards was right not to celebrate. The attorneys did not hear back from prosecutors, according to sources. Not even a call back. Not even a courtesy call. Hey, look, my boss told me that this is something that doesn't ring with us right now. I can't pursue this. I'm sorry. None of that. We just won't call and we'll ghost them. We'll blow smoke up their ass. We'll get the survivors fired up that they're going to get justice, and then we'll just ignore it. That is the SDNY under Preet. That is the SDNY under Loretta Lynch. The team thought they'd found a new way to entice the feds after Maxwell's depositions by attorney Sigrid Macaulay and Boyes in April and July 2016. Boyes and Pottinger reapproached Kramer and asked if the Southern District would consider charging Maxwell with perjury, sources said. She mentioned the comity typical between U.S. attorneys around the country, a source said. The lawyers for Epstein's survivors did not hear back from the Southern District regarding the perjury proposal. They believe that a Justice Department tradition of not second-guessing another U.S. attorney's work took precedence over the Southern District of New York's cherished reputation for fearlessness and independence. Now, they're fearless and independent when they're chasing down like a Stormy Daniels, right? If they think they're going to get some headlines out of it, hell yeah, they're charging hard. We're the SDNY. We're here to kick your ass. Meanwhile, they had this all laid out to them on a platter, and they don't move until a journalist kicks the tires and gets this shit going. That should give us confidence in the SDNY. That should give us confidence in Mr. Preet and Amanda Kramer. Certainly doesn't for me. All it does is open up a whole new line of questions, a whole new battle. Because these people, just like the scum in Florida, should be held responsible for their inaction. David was particularly frustrated by the failure to pursue a perjury charge, a source familiar with the meeting said. The source recalled Boyes telling colleagues, "We have her dead to rights." Kramer declined to comment. A spokesman for the Southern District of New York declined to comment. That's nice, huh? Isn't that real nice that they won't even comment? They work for you, remember. They work for me and you, and they won't even comment about their stupid-ass decision-making. It tells you all you need to know. We're certainly not in charge. The Just Us Department, out of control. The CIA, out of control. The FBI, out of control. And the two-tier justice system in the United States, most assuredly, folks, is out of control. A timeline of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking case. The office's attitude changed after the Miami Herald highlighted the perversion of justice that resulted in Epstein's receiving a slap on the wrist. Again, if you needed Julie Brown, a journalist, to blow this out of the water for you as a prosecutor in New York, when all of this was handed to you, when you had phone calls over this man for years, and people reported their behavior, if you needed Julie K. Brown's story to kick your ass into gear, you, my friends, are failures, and you have no business in that prosecutor's office. So retire, quit, go get a job at the grocery store. You're more equipped for that. Epstein killed himself last year, allegedly, while awaiting trial for underage sex trafficking. Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to grooming Epstein's underage survivors and perjury and is awaiting trial. Neither Epstein or Maxwell's lawyers responded to inquiries. This was not a situation where we were dealing with people who didn't care. I never thought they didn't believe our story. I never had any doubt that they were sympathetic, even outraged by it. They simply seemed to feel they couldn't be seen as second-guessing what the U.S. attorney in Florida had done, Boies said. Well, Boies has to say that, right? Boies has to be nice about this. He wants the prosecution to continue doing their jobs. I, on the other hand, do not have to be nice about it. I can say whatever the F I want, and in my opinion, this office was negligent, Preet was negligent, and Miss Kramer was also negligent. And it goes all the way up to Loretta Lynch. Buck stops there, right? She's the boss. If those are the rules we're going to be using, then those are the rules we're using all around for everybody, folks, okay? So Loretta Lynch should be asked about this. Preet, next time he's on the TV, running his fat mouth about the great job he did and when he was at the SDNY, somebody should just shove this right down his throat and ask him point blank, yo, Preet, why didn't you care about the Jeffrey Epstein survivors? Why didn't your office initiate an investigation until a journalist started nosing around? You don't think that your investigators could have unearthed this? You don't think that your investigators could have done their job and helped these survivors? They could have. You guys just didn't care. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. I'll be back tomorrow morning, folks, and we'll pick it back up then.